as the activity along the Rim of Fire continues, a lot of people are asking, are these earthquakes part of a continuing trend of increase in seismic activity? Well, according to the United States Geological Survey data, earthquake activity has remained relatively constant in the past century. Under the headline, "Are Earthquakes Really on the Increase?" in the Earthquake Myth section of their website, the USGS states, "We continue to be asked by many people throughout the world if earthquakes are on the increase. Although it may seem that we are having more earthquakes, earthquakes of magnitude 7 or greater have remained fairly constant throughout this century, and, according to our records, have actually seemed to decrease in recent years." Now, if we look at the USGS's data, this is statistically true. The total number of earthquakes of magnitude 7 or greater have remained pretty constant throughout the century, and even decreased a bit in the most recent decade. Here, we present the number of magnitude 7 or greater earthquakes for the last 3 decades. Their website explains that the apparent increase is simply due to the greater number of seismographs, improved telecommunication systems, and more people around on the planet to notice. But what happens if we look at the frequency of earthquakes magnitude 8 or greater over the same 3 decades? Keep in mind that a magnitude 8 quake is not simply just a little bit more powerful than a magnitude 7, because the scale is logarithmic. For example, a magnitude 8 has 32 times the energy of a magnitude 7. Earthquakes of magnitude 8 or greater are termed great earthquakes. A magnitude 9 earthquake is 1,000 times stronger than a magnitude 7. And we've had 2 earthquakes of magnitude 9 or greater in the last 7 years. The recent 9.0 in Japan, and then the 9.1 magnitude Sumatra earthquake of 2004. Before 2004, we hadn't seen one since 1964. So, what we are looking at here in this chart is a dramatic increase in the frequency of great earthquakes. Now, keeping in mind the question of whether the Earth is increasing in frequency of high-energy events, let's take a look at the activity of volcanoes. Volcanoes are measured according to the Volcanic Explosivity Index. Here, you see an increase in powerful volcanoes that rank greater than 4 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. If we look at a chart of volcanoes measuring 4 or above on this index, and add the number of great earthquakes, magnitude 8 or above, you see quite an increase in activity. In the decades since the solar maximum of year 2000, we've had both more great earthquakes and more cataclysmic volcanoes than any other decade in over a century. So if the energetic activity of the Earth is dramatically increasing and generating events that are causing massive destruction and loss of life, the obvious sane political move would be to launch a crash program for investigating the cause of these events, not launching the next round of budget cuts. We do have the scientific potential to immediately put together an international network to monitor earthquake precursors, whose alerts would help evacuate and save millions of lives. But, as has been demonstrated repeatedly, saving human lives and improving their future is not one of President Obama's top political priorities, to say the least. This has been clearly demonstrated in his shutdown of the very NASA missions that would help us solve these problems. By basing their presentation on the magnitude 7 or greater, and thus denying an increase in earthquake activity, the USGS under the Obama administration is committing a fraud. By employing this ruse, the chart shows a decrease in earthquakes over the very decade when the big increase in great earthquake and cataclysmic volcano activity was taking place. So the intention is clear. Don't tell people that more frequent and stronger earthquakes and volcanoes have been occurring over the past decade, and they won't demand that you do anything about it.
We know that earthbound phenomena, like earthquakes, are inexplicably linked to the sun and to the galaxy. And we know that living in our galaxy, especially right now, puts us as a species in the greatest danger of mass extinction. One example of that danger is earthquakes. And although we know of an entire list of precursors to earthquakes, including ionospheric and thermal precursors, optical precursors, very low and extremely low frequency emissions, particle precipitation, ion mass changes, and other small change irregularities as precursors. Although we know of those, there's absolutely no federal funding going to support these research efforts. So you have to ask, why aren't we doing this? Why are we right now taking down this capability, as with Obama's shutdown of NASA, to measure and respond to this situation? With the recently launched Operation Kepler, LaRouche PAC is demanding a full and complete set of satellite monitoring equipment to monitor changes in the Earth, its atmosphere, and our neighboring galactic region, in order to develop the capacities for forecasting and warning of potential earthquakes. This is because while you can't hang your hat on any one particular change in the Earth's environment, you can hone in on the forecastability of these earthquakes when you are receiving the same warnings from multiple sources. The Kepler project. While eventually we would want to be able to control earthquake phenomena, now, with merely a timely warning system, it's entirely possible to prevent any loss of life through mass evacuations. Look at the cases of 2 recent earthquakes, where it has been uncovered after the fact that plenty of evidence of these earthquake precursors existed that could have, in combination, issued a warning sign. First, let's look at the magnitude 8.0 earthquake that shook Sichuan, China on May 12, 2008, leaving 70,000 people dead and 5 million homeless. GPS satellites measured ionospheric fluctuation above the future epicenter preceding the quake, with a sharp increase of electron content on May 9th to 10th, and a sharp decrease on May 12th, the day of the quake. The now retired Demeter satellite, which can detect the lowest ranges of electrical frequencies, measured electrical field fluctuations above the future epicenter with a weak increase in intensity on May 1st, 11 days prior, and an intense increase in intensity May 6th, 6 days prior, and another intense increase in electrical field fluctuations on May 9th, 3 days prior. And thirdly, both NOAA and NASA weather satellites measured temperature changes emanating from the ground above the future epicenter on May 5th, 6 days prior to the quake. Now let's look at a quake in Sumatra, Indonesia. The December 26, 2004 magnitude 9.1 to 9.3 that left 230,000 people dead and 1.7 million homeless. A similar combination of precursor data has been collected since that quake. NOAA and NASA satellites detected the appearance of very large temperature increase over the future epicenter on December 21st, 5 days prior to the quake. A ground-based, very low-frequency transmitter and receiver, measuring across 2,000 kilometers in India, detected very irregular behavior of these signals as they traveled through the ionosphere, indicating ionospheric changes on December 22nd, 4 days before the quake. GPS satellites also recorded ionospheric changes, recording anomalous decreases in total electron content above the future epicenter on December 21st, 5 days prior to the quake. And again, the since offline Demeter satellite recorded decrease of very low frequency signal intensity for a month prior to the quake. In both of these instances of earthquakes, plenty of evidence was available to have forecast the possibility of an earthquake, to have gone with mass evacuations, and to have prevented these massive losses of life, had the policy been in place to do so. It was announced by Polish scientist Jan Blecki yesterday that in 2014, a Chinese satellite will pick up the mission of the Demeter satellite, which we mentioned earlier in this report, and which was taken offline in 2009. Blecky also mentioned an entire set of smaller satellites to assist this new mission, which he said is of high importance, referring to the temperature anomalies measured by U.S. weather satellites in 2008, shortly before the Sichuan quake. So this outbreak of scientific creativity is exposing a reality that the lies of Obama and others will not be able to cover up.